Babylon changed Daniel's name, his language, and his future, but it could not change who he belonged to. As a teenager, Daniel was dragged from Jerusalem into the world's most powerful empire, trained to think like Babylon, eat like Babylon, and serve its king. Then one royal command threatened his faith, and another threatened his life. So how did Daniel remain faithful under pressure, face an impossible crisis, and turn a pagan king's attention toward God? Daniel 1 and 2 record the real experiences of a young man forced to live in a culture that did not honor his God. Yet Daniel shows us that it is possible to serve faithfully in an ungodly environment without allowing that environment to redefine who we are, control how we respond, or take the glory that belongs to God. Judah's continued rebellion against God had brought his promised judgment. Nebuchadnezzar invaded Jerusalem, removed some of the temple articles, and carried several young men from Judah into Babylon. Daniel and his friends were selected because they were intelligent, capable, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. But Babylon did not merely want their abilities. It wanted to reshape their identity. They were taught Babylonian language and literature. They were given food from the king's table. Even their names were replaced with names connected to Babylonian gods. Daniel, whose Hebrew name meant "God is my judge," was renamed Belteshazzar. The pressure Daniel faced may look different from the pressure Christians face today, but its purpose is often the same. The culture around us constantly tries to tell us who we are, what we should value, and what we must accept to succeed. It may not physically remove us from our homes, but it can slowly separate our identity from what God has declared to be true. Babylon could decide what Daniel was called, where he lived, and what he studied, but it could not decide who Daniel belonged to. Daniel did not resist everything Babylon offered. He learned its language, studied its literature, and prepared to serve its king. But when the royal food threatened to defile him, Daniel recognized a boundary he could not cross. Daniel 1:8 says, "But Daniel resolved not to defile himself." That word, resolved, matters. Daniel made a decision within his heart before the pressure became overwhelming. He also responded with humility. Daniel did not insult the official, organize a public rebellion, or behave as though faithfulness gave him permission to become disrespectful. He asked for permission and proposed a 10-day test involving vegetables and water. This is important for believers living in environments that do not honor God. Faithfulness does not require us to reject everything around us. Daniel understood Babylonian culture and served within its system, but he refused to allow participation to become compromise. The same decision confronts us today. At work, at school, online, or among friends, there will be moments when acceptance appears to require disobedience. Our strongest defense in those moments is not an identity created by the culture, but an identity already settled in God. Daniel knew that refusing the food could create consequences, but he had already decided that honoring God mattered more than fitting into Babylon. And cultural pressure does not only tempt us to compromise. Sometimes it places us in situations that human wisdom cannot solve. In Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar had a troubling dream. He demanded that his wise men reveal both the dream and its meaning. When they admitted that no human being could fulfill his demand, the furious king ordered the execution of all Babylon's wise men, including Daniel and his friends. Daniel was now facing a problem he had not created and could not solve. Yet he did not panic. Daniel responded to the commander with wisdom and tact. He asked the king for time, returned home, and explained the situation to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Daniel 2:17-18 says, he urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery. Daniel did not isolate himself under pressure. He gathered faithful friends, told them the truth about the danger, and prayed with them. When a crisis arrives, our first instinct may be to panic, search for an escape, or carry the burden alone. Daniel's first response was dependence on God. Prayer was not Daniel's final option after every other solution failed. Prayer was his response because he knew that what was impossible for human beings was not impossible for the God of heaven. During the night, God revealed the mystery to Daniel. But before Daniel rushed to the palace, he stopped and worshipped. Praise be to the name of God, forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. Daniel 2:20. Prayer gave Daniel the answer, but what he did with that answer revealed where his identity truly rested. Daniel was brought before the most powerful ruler in the known world, with knowledge no other person possessed. This was an opportunity to make himself look extraordinary. He could have presented himself as wiser than Babylon's magicians, or used the moment to secure personal recognition. Arioch attempted to claim some of the credit by telling the king that he had found a man who could interpret the dream. Daniel responded differently. Daniel 2:27-28 says, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. Daniel did not deny that God had given him an ability, but he made it clear that he was not the source. This is where our faith becomes visible to others. People may notice our wisdom, resilience, discipline, creativity, or excellence. The question is whether those gifts make people admire us alone, or whether our lives direct their attention toward the God who gave them. Daniel served with excellence, but excellence was not his final goal. His life became a witness. He then explained that the different parts of Nebuchadnezzar's statue represented earthly kingdoms that would rise and fall. Babylon appeared powerful, but it was temporary. Eventually, God would establish a kingdom that could never be destroyed. Daniel could remain faithful inside Babylon because he knew Babylon was not ultimate. He served an earthly king, but he belonged to an eternal kingdom. Daniel honored God through personal conviction, united prayer, and public witness. Then God honored Daniel's obedience. Daniel 1:17 says, "To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning." At the end of their training, Daniel and his friends were found to be wiser than the other servants in the kingdom. God later revealed Nebuchadnezzar's dream to Daniel, used him to save the lives of Babylon's wise men, and placed him in a position of influence. Nebuchadnezzar responded, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries." Daniel 2:47. The king had not yet fully surrendered to God, but Daniel's faithfulness had forced him to acknowledge that Daniel's God possessed wisdom and authority beyond anything found in Babylon. God honors obedience. In Daniel's case, that honor included wisdom, protection, influence, and promotion. But obedience is not a formula that guarantees every believer an easy life, immediate success, or public recognition. God may honor obedience by strengthening our faith, using our witness, protecting us from compromise, or accomplishing purposes we cannot yet see. The greatest result is not that Daniel received a powerful position. It is that Daniel's conduct caused God's name to be honored inside a culture that worshipped other gods. Babylon may not look the same today, but its pressure remains familiar. The world will still try to name you, redefine what is good, and convince you that compromise is necessary to survive. Daniel's life shows another way. Know who you belong to. Resolve to honor God before the pressure comes. Pray when the problem is beyond your ability. Serve with humility and excellence. And when God works through your life, make sure the glory returns to him. Because cultures change, human kingdoms rise and fall, but God remains sovereign. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and God honors obedience.